Nowadays, we're all taught so many study techniques to improve the way we learn, but my issue was always that no one ever shows us exactly what they do during the perfect study session. I always wanted to know how the ideal student mastered a topic, what they did, how they learned, step by step, hour by hour, everything. I believe that after all this time, I now have a really unique way of studying that would help a lot of people. So in this video, I wanted to do an in-depth dive into what I do during a 4-hour active, focused study session. This is my process. Every single technique, method, everything that I even think about during those 4 hours of study. Before starting, equipping yourself. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. Benjamin Franklin. I know that most of us skip the planning stage of the studying, but you need to know what you're going to be doing today and how you're going to be tackling it over time. It's the only way you'll stay focused and driven during the actual studying. I first look at everything that I need to do, all the topics, and then I pick 3 to 4 high yield ones or ones that need the most attention to then tackle that day. Then I actively plan the best way to revise them, what type of study methods I'll be using, what resources are best suited for the learning. Because if 2 people have a few hours to chop down a tree, and one of them is just going at it with a dull axe, they're not going to get anywhere. Whereas the one who sharpens their axe, even if they use 60% of their time to sharpen their axe, calculate their approach, all it takes is one swing of theirs to chop down the tree. So take that same methodical approach to plan the way you're going to study effectively. Make sure you also have the best resources to learn from, because that is literally where you get all your info from. Hour 1, scanning. I always start with priming myself for the studying. In that first hour, I scan the subtopics and skim read all the 4 chapters that I want to get done in that study session. And what this does is that it simply allows me to process the information a lot faster. By doing this, I'm minimizing the amount of time that I get stuck on something and I have to reread to understand it. Because I know that once we jump directly into the details, we're way more likely to lose focus, get confused, and then just not want to do this. So I make sure to do 2 things to prime myself. 1, a 5-minute preview, and 2, a slowed down skimming of the 4 chapters. The preview is just 5 minutes of work, literally just flicking through the pages, reading the subheadings, looking at the bolded sentences, looking up keywords, just getting a general gist of the chapter. It's about taking in the structure of the information, looking at pictures, doing that sort of stuff to get you primed and ready to then skim read. The second step takes a bit longer. It's the skimming. I do the skimming for 15 minutes per chapter on average. It involves reading the summary bits, reading a paragraph or 2 here and there, and then watching a 5-minute video of the concept to cap it off. It's quite simple really. I know you just want to get straight in and this feels like a waste of time, but by building up from the basic topics to then the overview concepts and then to the complex details, I'm priming and building that foundation for my brain. Because once you have the basics on lock, you can piece things together and absorb those harder details a lot quicker. Hour 2, dive into the first and second chapter. The next hour is devoted to 1, fully understanding 2 big topics, and 2, side by side creating recall questions. And this is how I do it. For most things in med school, I use both the textbook and the condensed notes that we have from seniors to properly read through the topic. But to me, understanding is the most important step. Doing the simpler stuff first, then the harder stuff. If I can focus up and do that from the get-go, then I'm setting myself up to remember everything, almost everything that I read. And the thing that I'm actively thinking about while I'm reading is, okay, how can I understand and encode this topic in my head cleverly? If this paragraph is a bit difficult to understand, has so many details in there, then I jump to the textbook for a bit more of an explanation. If I can't 100% picture a process, then I'm googling up a flowchart or a diagram to help me picture it. If it's still hard, then I look for a video on YouTube or an alternative explanation. If I need to memorize something, then I'm thinking, okay, what story can I bring up and tell myself about this that will make it more memorable? This is the sort of stuff that genuinely goes through my head. And while I'm reading and doing this, I create my recall questions. Every few sentences of the paragraph, I'm thinking, okay, what's important here? What sort of questions can I be asked? Okay, this sentence is important, that sentence is important. Let's write 2 questions about these for this paragraph. And I make them very specific. It's never just explain this, explain that. It's usually define this, describe this process, name 5 of these. And by the end of it, I usually have a list of 20+ questions for each subtopic. And because I'm continuously making recall questions for myself, I'm less likely to get stuck, I'm more engaged, and I won't get bored. To me, learning is a very fluid, active process. I never just want to stay on the same page. If you don't understand something, it's much more efficient to keep switching it up till you do. Going back and forth between the textbook, Google, notes, the questions, doing more than just reading. In my experience, that's the only way to really understand something properly and do it much quicker than most people. The third hour, teaching everything to yourself. It's so easy to trick ourselves into thinking that, I know this topic after reading it for like an hour. But just because you look at it and recognize it doesn't mean you understand it. So after I've done those 2 chapters, I always spend 15 to 20 minutes summarizing and teaching the main concepts of those 2 chapters to myself. It's this sort of small step in between your studying that most people don't do that I think allows me to remember much more of what I read the first time just because I've summarized it at the end. I literally just look at the list of subtopics, and for each one of them I just describe the general pathology or the physiology involved, and I try and make it more memorable for myself as well by using analogies and mnemonics while I'm explaining it to myself. In my book, teaching yourself doesn't only just show you if you understand it or not, but for me, trying to explain it to myself forces me to connect everything I learned into one coherent monologue. And that's what teaching does. It connects neurons in your brain that haven't been connected before. And then the rest of the hour, the remaining 40 to 45 minutes, I spend time doing what I was doing before, but doing it with the 3rd and 4th chapter. I read and understand those chapters by using different resources, trying to solidify it as much as possible, and creating good quality questions side by side. Hour 4, testing myself with recall questions. And in the final hour, the most important part for attention, I now test myself and attempt all of the recall questions I made throughout the entire study session. I have the document of questions open in one window and the textbook or notes in the other. I try my level best to recall what I know for around 2 or 3 of the questions in a row that are all to do with the same thing. And then after I've done my best try, I go back and check what I didn't know to see where my knowledge gaps are. I also color code the questions based on how well I answer them. And initially you will have most questions be orange or red because you won't be able to remember much, but it is worth underlining here that it doesn't really matter whether you get questions right or wrong at this point. The best form of learning happens when you actively try and take information out of your head. The times when you're doing testing and recall are the magic moments where the information is getting solidified in your head. So doing these questions is more of a form of learning the information rather than just to see whether you know something or don't. I would suggest trying to get more serious with it in later repetitions closer to your exams to really figure out the best way to remember the stuff that you find hard. But for now, just try and get through as many as you can, try your best. Improve the quality of the questions as you go along and work on them just to make them better and just improve your understanding overall. That's all you can do. Now, people may ask questions about, how do you maintain focus for that long? There's no way that you can do it for 4 hours straight, but I really think that a lot of you can. So I'm going to link 2 videos here about how you can maintain focus and how you can stay in that flow state for a long time without getting distracted. Check it out if you're interested. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this has helped, and I'll see you in the next one.